"Stranded with
You
my
cannot
boss on
stay
an
here.
island," she said.
We will
"If
not
no one
allow
comes,
it.
will you stay with me?" He never expected
need
that
help.
work would take him this far from everything familiar. For him, the trip was simple. A short assignment, a few days away from the office, nothing more. He had packed light, thinking only about schedules, reports, and returning home on time. She, on the other hand, treated it like every other task in her life, with strict planning and clear control. She was his boss, after all. Calm on the outside, sharp in every decision, and always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. They were not close. They spoke only when necessary. At work, their conversation stayed professional and brief. He respected her position. She expected results. That was the balance they had always known. The boat was small but reliable, or at least that was what they were told. It was meant to take them across a stretch of water to visit a nearby location connected to their project. The weather earlier that day had been calm, almost peaceful. The sea looked wide and quiet, stretching endlessly under the open sky. At first, everything went as planned. He sat near the side of the boat, watching the waves rise and fall. She sat across from him, checking notes on her tablet, focused as always. The sound of the engine filled the silence between them. There was no reason to speak. Then the wind changed. It started softly, like a warning no one paid attention to. The air grew heavier. The sky slowly darkened, clouds gathering faster than expected. The boat rocked once, then again. The driver frowned and adjusted the direction. Within minutes, the calm sea turned restless. Rain fell suddenly, sharp and cold. The wind grew strong, pushing the boat sideways. Waves slapped against the sides, water splashing inside. The engine struggled, coughing loudly as if fighting to stay alive. She finally looked up, concern flashing across her face. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice firm but tense. The driver tried to reassure them, but his hands shook on the controls. He shouted over the wind that they needed to change course. The storm had come too fast. A loud crack echoed through the air. The boat jolted hard, throwing him forward. He grabbed the side, his heart pounding. Water rushed in faster now. The engine sputtered and then stopped completely. Silence followed, but it was not calm. It was the kind of silence filled with danger. The waves pushed them wherever they wanted. The driver tried to restart the engine again and again, but nothing worked. The rain soaked everyone. The sky was dark now, the horizon lost behind thick clouds. That was when they saw land. A small island appeared through the rain, rough and wild. Trees bent under the wind. Rocks lined the shore. It didn't look welcoming, but it was solid. It was something. With no other choice, the driver aimed the powerless boat toward it, letting the waves carry them closer. The boat scraped against rocks, shaking violently, but it didn't break apart. One by one, they jumped into shallow water and pushed their way toward land. When his feet touched sand, relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by fear. They were safe from the sea, but stranded. The storm passed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving behind a heavy, quiet air. The driver examined the boat and shook his head. It was badly damaged. There was no signal, no clear way to call for help. He looked around the island, dense trees, uneven ground. No signs of people, no buildings, no boats nearby. This place was empty. She stood a few steps away, arms crossed tightly, staring at the damaged boat. Water dripped from her hair and clothes, but she didn't seem to notice. For the first time since he had known her, she looked unsure. "We'll be found," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "They'll send help." He wanted to believe her, but as he scanned the horizon, he felt a heavy truth settle in. Rescue might take time, maybe days. As night slowly approached, the island changed. The light faded, shadows stretching between the trees. The air grew cooler. Sounds he couldn't identify echoed around them. They had limited supplies, a small bag with water bottles, some snacks, a flashlight with weak batteries. Nothing more. The driver did what he could, promising to try again in the morning to fix the boat. Until then, they needed to stay on land. He noticed she stayed close to him without realizing it. The confident distance she usually kept was gone. Out here, titles meant nothing. There was no office, no rules, just two people standing on unfamiliar ground. They moved inland slightly, looking for a safer spot away from the waves. He helped gather dry leaves and broken branches to make a simple place to sit. She watched him quietly, surprised by how naturally he took charge. "You've done this before?" she asked. "No," he replied honestly. "I just think it makes sense," she nodded. There was no argument, no command. That alone felt strange. As darkness fully settled, the island felt larger and more threatening. The stars above were bright, untouched by city lights. The sound of the ocean was constant, reminding them how far they were from help. They sat a short distance apart, listening. He broke the silence. "We should save food, eat small amounts." She agreed immediately. "Yes, we don't know how long this will be." Her voice was steady again, but softer than usual. Time moved slowly. Every sound made them alert. Every movement in the trees raised questions. Fear crept in quietly, settling deep in his chest. He glanced at her and noticed she was staring into the darkness, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" he asked before he could stop himself. She hesitated. "I don't like not knowing what comes next." It was an honest answer. Not something he expected from her. Neither of them slept much that night. The ground was hard. The air was cold. Their minds refused to rest. He kept watch, listening to the island breathe around them. At some point she shifted closer, sitting beside him instead of across. Their shoulders almost touched. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For staying calm." He didn't know how to respond. He had never thought of himself as calm. He was just doing what needed to be done. As the night dragged on, one truth became clear to both of them. They were no longer boss and employee. They were just two people stranded together, waiting for morning to come. Morning came slowly, as if the island itself was unsure whether to welcome the new day. He woke up first. His body felt stiff, and his head hurt from lack of sleep. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he heard the waves and smelled the salt in the air, and reality returned all at once. The island, the broken boat, no signal, no clear help. She was still asleep a short distance away, sitting against a tree with her arms wrapped around herself. Her face looked softer in sleep, free from the sharp focus she always carried at work. Without the office clothes, the neat hair, and the authority, she looked like a normal person, tired and human. He stood quietly and walked toward the shore. The boat was still there, pushed slightly higher by the tide during the night. From a distance it looked worse than before. He didn't need to touch it to know that fixing it would be difficult. The driver soon joined him, rubbing his eyes and sighing heavily. Together they examined the damage. A deep crack along the side, water damage inside. The engine looked hopeless. "I'll try," the driver said, though his voice lacked confidence, "but I can't promise anything." That was not comforting, but it was honest. When she woke up, she walked toward them, brushing sand from her clothes. She looked around the island again, as if hoping something had changed overnight. "Any good news?" she asked. The driver shook his head slightly. "I'll do my best," she nodded, but disappointment flashed in her eyes before she hid it. At work, she never showed weakness. Here, it slipped out before she could stop it. They agreed on one thing quickly: they needed to survive first. Waiting without doing anything would only make things worse. Food, water, shelter, those were now their priorities. He suggested exploring the island a little, staying close and marking their path so they wouldn't get lost. She agreed immediately, trusting his judgment without question. That surprised him. They walked together through the trees, the ground uneven under their feet. The island was quiet but alive. Birds moved above them. Insects buzzed in the air. It was beautiful in a wild, untouched way, but also unsettling. They found a small stream of fresh water after walking for a while. It wasn't large, but it was enough. Relief filled both of them. "This helps," she said, letting out a breath she had been holding. "A lot," he nodded. Water is important." She smiled slightly at his simple words, then quickly looked away as if embarrassed by the smile. They gathered large leaves and carried them back toward their resting spot. He showed her how to place them to block wind and create shade. She followed carefully, listening, asking questions without hesitation. "You're good at this," she said at one point. "I'm not," he replied. "I just think step by step." She thought about that for a moment. Maybe that's why. Back at the shore, the driver was still working on the boat. His expression told them enough. Things were not improving. The day grew warmer. Hunger began to make itself known. They shared a small snack, dividing it carefully. Every bite felt important now. As hours passed, something subtle changed between them. At work, she always led. She spoke, others listened. Here, decisions were shared. Sometimes she waited for his opinion before speaking. Other times he acted first without realizing it. They talked more than they ever had before. Not about work deadlines or tasks, but about small things, where they grew up, what they liked to eat, how they spent quiet evenings. The conversation felt strange at first, like stepping into unknown territory, but it slowly became easier. She admitted she rarely rested, that her phone was always on. That silence made her uncomfortable. "I don't like feeling useless," she said quietly as they sat near the water. "At work I know what to do, here I don't." He understood that feeling more than he expected. "I think no one is useless here," he said, "just different." She looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. The sun moved lower in the sky, still no rescue, no boats, no sounds of engines. Hope felt fragile now, something that had to be handled carefully to avoid breaking it. Fear returned slowly, creeping in as shadows grew longer. She grew quieter as evening approached. Her movements slowed. Her eyes followed the horizon again and again, searching. He noticed her hands shaking slightly. "Hey," he said gently, "we're okay. We made it through one night. We can do another." She nodded, but her lips pressed together tightly. "I know, I just hate not knowing." That was the second time she had said something like that. It told him more about her than months of working together ever had. They prepared for the night again. This time they were more organized. The shelter was better, the leaves thicker. They saved a little water. Everything felt planned, even though the situation itself was not. When darkness came, it felt heavier than before. The island sounded louder at night. Every rustle felt closer. Every shadow seemed to move. She sat beside him again, closer than the night before. Neither mentioned it. "I keep thinking about the office," she said suddenly. "About emails waiting for answers. Meetings that won't happen." "They'll wait," he said. "This matters more." She laughed softly, a short sound filled with disbelief. "You sound so sure." "I'm not," he admitted. "I just don't think worrying helps." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're different from what I thought." He wasn't sure how to take that. "Is that good or bad?" "Good," she replied quickly. "Just unexpected." The words stayed with him. Later that night, the driver joined them briefly. He explained again that the boat couldn't move. He would keep trying. They thanked him, though all three knew there was little more he could do. Sleep came in short pieces. He stayed awake longer, listening, watching, protecting in his own quiet way. At some point, she spoke softly into the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes." "I'm glad you're here." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it felt important. He turned slightly toward her. "Me too." The island had taken away their comfort, their control, and their usual roles. But in doing so, it had revealed something else, an understanding that did not need titles or authority. As the second night passed, one thing became clear. Survival was no longer just about food and shelter. It was about trust. The third day began with a strange kind of calm. The sky was clear and the sea looked gentle again, almost as if it wanted to hide what it had done before. Sunlight filtered through the trees, warming the sand and drying the damp air. For a brief moment, the island did not feel like a prison. It felt quiet, still. He woke up to the sound of birds and the steady rhythm of waves. His body ached, but his mind felt sharper than the previous days. He sat up slowly and looked around. She was already awake. She stood near the water, barefoot, staring at the horizon. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes searched the distance, as if she expected something to appear if she stared long enough. He walked toward her and stopped a few steps away, not wanting to break the moment too suddenly. "Morning," he said softly. She turned and nodded. "Morning." They stood there together in silence. It did not feel uncomfortable anymore. Silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like distance. It felt shared. The driver was still asleep, resting after another long night of trying to fix the boat. There was nothing new to report. Nothing had changed. They already knew that. Instead of waiting, they returned to their routine. They collected water from the stream. They checked the shelter. They shared a small meal. Every action felt familiar now, like steps in a pattern they had learned together. While working, they talked. Not constantly, not nervously, just enough. She asked him about his childhood. He told her about growing up in a small place where people knew each other by name. Where life moved slower. Where silence was normal, not something to fear. She listened carefully, asking questions, remembering details. He asked her about her early career, not the success but the beginning, the part before confidence. She hesitated at first, then spoke honestly. "I was afraid all the time," she said. "Afraid of failing, afraid of being ignored, afraid of not being enough." "That doesn't sound like you," he said without thinking. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "That's because I worked very hard to hide it." The island seemed to make honesty easier. There were no walls here, no desks, no expectations, just time and space. As the day went on, the heat increased. They rested under the shade of trees, watching clouds move slowly across the sky. It felt strange to have nothing to rush toward. "I don't remember the last time I did nothing," she said. "You're doing something now," he replied. "You're surviving." She laughed softly. "That's a new skill for me." Later, they heard a sound in the distance. It was faint, almost unclear. Both of them stood up quickly, hearts racing. "Did you hear that?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes." They moved toward the shore, scanning the water. For a few seconds, hope rushed through them like a strong wave. He imagined a boat, a voice, help, but the sound faded. It was only the wind. The disappointment hit harder than they expected. She lowered herself onto the sand and covered her face with her hands. "I really thought," she whispered, unable to finish. He sat beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence. "It's okay," he said quietly. "It's okay to hope." She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "I know, I just hate getting it wrong." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and understood something important. She was not afraid of the island. She was afraid of disappointment. The rest of the day passed quietly. They spoke less, but their awareness of each other grew stronger. Every movement, every pause felt noticed. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat together again near the shelter. The sky turned orange and pink, reflected in the water. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "Even like this." She glanced at him. "You don't sound angry." "I was," he admitted. "At first, but being angry takes energy. I don't have extra." She smiled at that, a real smile this time. Night came gently. The island's sounds felt familiar now, less threatening, almost comforting. They shared stories to pass the time, small ones, simple ones, moments that had shaped them quietly. She told him about a time she had chosen work over someone important in her life, how she had believed success would make everything else easier. "It didn't," she said. "It just made me better at being alone." He didn't judge her. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. He told her about times he had stayed silent when he wanted to speak, about choosing safety over honesty, about watching opportunities pass because he was afraid to reach for them. They sat close now. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. The bond between them was not sudden. It was slow, built from shared fear, shared effort, shared quiet. Later that night they noticed light far away on the water, a small flicker, weak but real. Both of them stood up at the same time. "There," she said, pointing. He saw it too. They waved the flashlight. They shouted. Their voices carried over the water. For a moment the light seemed to respond. Then it disappeared. She stood frozen, staring into the darkness. Her breathing became uneven. He placed a hand lightly on her arm, not to hold her, just to steady her. "I know," he said gently. "I know." She closed her eyes and leaned slightly toward him, as if the strength had left her body. "I don't want to feel this anymore," she said. "This waiting, this not knowing." He didn't have answers. He only had honesty. "I think we feel it together," he said. "That's all we can do." They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, not moving, just sharing the weight. When they finally lay down to rest, she stayed closer than before. There was no discussion about it, no explanation needed. In the quiet, she spoke again. "I trust you," she said softly. The words surprised him, not because he didn't want to hear them, but because of how much they meant. "I won't let you down," he replied, and for the first time since the storm, he believed it. The island had not brought rescue yet. It had not given answers. But it had done something else. It had turned two distant lives into one shared moment, and neither of them was the same anymore. The fourth day felt heavier than the ones before, not because the island had changed, but because their minds had. The morning arrived with thick clouds covering the sky. The sun was hidden and the air felt still, almost stuck. The sea looked calm but not friendly. It was quiet in a way that made waiting harder. He woke up and noticed she was still asleep, curled slightly on her side. She looked tired more than before. The days of waiting, hoping, and then losing hope again were slowly wearing her down. He stood up quietly and walked toward the water, letting his thoughts settle. Each day without rescue made the truth clearer. Help might come late. Or it might not come at all. That thought stayed with him. When she woke up, she did not stand right away. She sat there staring at the ground as if gathering strength before moving. "Good morning," he said gently. She looked up and forced a small smile. "Morning." Her voice sounded different, thinner. They went through their routine again. Water, food, shelter, everything done slower than usual, less talk, more silence. The driver tried the boat again, even though everyone already knew the result. When he finally stepped away, he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. As the hours passed, the sky darkened slightly, even though it was still early. The island felt smaller somehow, as if it were slowly closing in. She sat alone for a while near the edge of the trees. He noticed her shoulders shaking slightly. At first he wasn't sure. Then he understood. She was crying. He didn't rush to her. He walked slowly and sat beside her, leaving space. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't usually do this." "You don't have to apologize," he replied. "Anyone would feel this way." She shook her head. "I don't like losing control." "I know." That answer surprised her. She looked at him. "You do?" "Yes," he said simply. "You've said it before. Control makes you feel safe." She laughed weakly. "And now I have none." The truth of that hung between them. They sat together quietly. The sounds of the island continued around them, uncaring and steady. After a while she spoke again, her voice low. "I keep thinking, what if no one comes soon?" He didn't answer right away. He chose his words carefully. "Then we keep doing what we're doing," he said. "One day at a time." She nodded, but her eyes filled again. "That sounds strong when you say it." "I don't feel strong," he admitted. "I just don't want to give up." She looked away, staring at the trees. "I don't want to be alone here." The words were simple, but they carried weight. That afternoon, the weather worsened slightly. The wind picked up. Clouds moved faster across the sky. The temperature dropped. They stayed close to the shelter, conserving energy. As evening approached, the tension grew. The fourth night felt more frightening than the first, because now fear had time to grow roots. They sat together as the sky darkened. The flashlight was weaker now. Supplies were lower. Hope felt tired. She hugged her knees and stared ahead. "I've spent my whole life planning for the future," she said suddenly. "Goals, deadlines, 5-year plans." He listened carefully. "And now," she continued, "I can't even plan for tomorrow." He understood her more than she realized. "Maybe," he said, "this is the first time you're really living in the present." She looked at him, unsure. "That sounds nice, but it's scary." "Yes," he agreed, "but you're not facing it alone." She swallowed hard. Night fell completely. The island felt different tonight, louder, darker. The wind moved through the trees like whispers. Every sound felt close. She shifted nearer to him without thinking. He didn't move away. "I'm cold," she said quietly. He adjusted the leaves around them, trying to block the wind. There was only so much he could do. They sat close, sharing warmth, sharing silence. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then she spoke again, her voice shaking just slightly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "Promise you'll be honest." "I will." She took a deep breath. "If no one comes," she paused, struggling to continue. "If help doesn't come soon, will you stay with me?" The question hung in the air, fragile and real. He didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't want to, but because he understood what she was really asking. She wasn't asking for comfort or words. She was asking for certainty in a place where there was none. She lifted her head and looked at him, eyes full of fear, hope, and something else he couldn't name. "I don't mean forever," she added quickly, as if afraid of the meaning. "I just mean here together." He felt his chest tighten. "Yes," he said quietly, "I'll stay." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if she had been holding her breath for days. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat there after that, closer than ever before, not touching much, just close enough to feel each other's presence. The storm never came, but sleep did not either. She spoke softly into the darkness. "I've never said something like that to anyone." "I know," he replied. "I don't usually need people," she said, "or at least I tell myself I don't." He looked at her, though she couldn't see his face clearly. "Needing someone doesn't make you weak," he said. "It makes you human." She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "I'm glad it's you." Those words stayed with him. The night stretched on. Fear still existed, but it was different now. Shared fear felt lighter than fear carried alone. At one point she rested her head against his shoulder, exhausted. He stayed still, afraid to disturb the moment. He stared up at the dark sky and realized something. The island had taken away their old lives, but it had given them honesty. As the fourth night slowly passed, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever happened next, neither of them would forget this moment. Because in the middle of uncertainty, one simple question had changed everything, and one simple answer had made them less afraid. The fifth morning arrived quietly, almost gently. The sky was clear again, washed clean by the night air. The sea looked calm, wide, and endless, reflecting soft light as the sun slowly rose. It felt like the island was holding its breath. He woke up with stiffness in his body and thoughts heavy in his mind. For a moment he didn't move. He just listened to the waves, the birds, the wind moving through the trees. These sounds had become familiar now, almost comforting. She was still asleep beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. At some point during the night, exhaustion had finally pulled her into deep rest. He stayed still, not wanting to wake her too soon. The question she had asked the night before stayed in his mind, and his answer, he didn't regret it. When she finally stirred, she lifted her head slowly and looked around, as if checking that everything was real. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied. They shared a small smile. It was quiet, natural, no pressure behind it. They stood and stretched, then went through their routine one last time, water from the stream, a careful share of food, checking the shelter. Everything felt slower, more thoughtful. Neither of them spoke much. The driver was awake too, sitting near the boat with tired eyes. He had not given up, but his hope was thin now. "I'll keep watching the water," he said, "just in case." They nodded and thanked him. The hours passed. Midday came, then slowly moved on. The sun climbed higher, warming the sand. The air felt different today, lighter. Or maybe that was just inside them. She sat near the shore, knees pulled close, staring at the horizon again. He sat beside her as he had so many times before. "If we leave today," she said suddenly, "do you think this will feel like a dream?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe. But I think some parts will stay real," she nodded. "I hope so." They watched the water in silence. Then far away something moved. At first it was just a small shape, easy to mistake for a shadow or a trick of the light. He leaned forward slightly, heart beating faster. She noticed his movement. "What is it?" "I'm not sure," he said, "but look." They both stood. The shape grew clearer as it moved closer, a thin line against the bright water, then a sound, low, steady, real, an engine. She covered her mouth, afraid to breathe. "Is that?" "Yes," he said, "I think it is." They waved their arms, they shouted. Their voices broke as they called out, louder than they ever had before. The boat changed direction. This time it did not disappear. Relief rushed through her all at once. Her legs gave way and she sank to the sand, laughing and crying at the same time. He knelt beside her, steadying her as she tried to catch her breath. "They're coming," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "They're really coming." The rescue boat reached the shore not long after. Voices called out. Hands helped them up. Questions came quickly. They answered as best they could. The moment felt rushed, loud, unreal. As they stepped onto the boat, she looked back at the island one last time, the trees, the shelter, the quiet place that had held them. She felt a strange sadness mixed with relief. The ride back felt short, even though it took time. Wrapped in blankets, given water, surrounded by people, they slowly returned to the world they had left behind. And with it came reality. Phones rang again, messages waited, work existed, responsibilities returned. By the time they reached land, she had straightened her posture. Her voice sounded firmer, familiar. At the hospital, they were checked, questioned, cleared. The driver was taken care of as well. When it was finally over, they stood outside in the open air, the world moving around them like nothing had happened. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. "I guess," she said slowly, "this is where things go back to normal." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Do you want them to?" he asked. She hesitated. The question surprised her. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me does. It's easier. And the other part," she met his eyes, "the other part doesn't want to forget." They returned to work a few days later. The office looked the same. The desks, the lights, the noise, but something had changed between them. At first they kept distance, professional, careful. They spoke only when necessary, but every look carried memory. Every pause carried meaning. Sometimes she caught herself watching him from across the room. Sometimes he noticed her hesitation before speaking, something no one else ever saw. One evening, after most people had left, she stood near his desk. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. "Of course." They walked outside together, the city lights glowing around them. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what happened, about us." "So have I," he replied. She stopped walking and faced him. "I don't want to pretend it didn't matter." Neither did he. "I don't think it was just the island," he said carefully. "I think it was honesty." She smiled softly. "I think you're right." They stood there, not rushing, not afraid. "I don't know what this becomes," she said, "and I don't want to force it." "We don't have to," he said. "We can just be real," she nodded. "I'd like that." As they walked on, side by side, he realized something important. The island had been a beginning, not an escape. It had stripped away titles and fears and control. What remained was choice. And this time, whatever they chose, it would be together.